Rain came down in sheets, the kind that turns sidewalks into rivers and makes every streetlight look like it is crying. Clara Evans stood under the pitiful shelter of a drugstore awning, clutching a plastic bag with 2 cans of soup and a loaf of bread that had already gone soggy. Her shoes, once black, now gray, let water in with every shift of weight. 28 years old, third-year teacher, living paycheck to paycheck in a city that charged more for a studio apartment than she earned in a month after taxes. The kids called her Miss Clara, with the kind of love that made the long hours worth it. But love didn't pay the electric bill that was now 3 weeks overdue. She was calculating whether she could walk the last 6 blocks home without catching pneumonia when she saw him. An old man on the park bench across the street, soaked to the bone, head bowed against the storm. No umbrella, no coat, just a threadbare cardigan the color of weak tea and pajama pants, printed with tiny blue sailboats. His white hair stuck to his skull in thin strands. One hand clutched a small leather notebook against his chest, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. People hurried past, heads down, pretending not to see. Clara saw. She crossed the street without thinking, rain plastering her hair to her face. "Sir?" she called over the downpour. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't look up. His lips moved, repeating the same word over and over, soft as breath. Bench, bench. Clara crouched, water pooling around her knees. "Sir, you're going to freeze. Do you have somewhere to go?" His eyes lifted milky blue, confused, ancient. They focused on her face for a single heartbeat of clarity, then slid away again. "Bench," he whispered, clutching the notebook tighter. Clara looked around. No one stopped. No one even slowed. She pulled out her phone to call 911, but the screen was dead. Water had finally killed the cracked screen she'd been nursing for months. The nearest shelter was full. She had dropped off donated coats there last week and heard the director turn away a mother with a toddler. Hospitals would keep him 72 hours at most, then release him back to the streets with a paper bracelet and a prayer. The rain intensified, drumming on the bench like it wanted him gone. Clara stood. She took off her own coat-thin thrift store wool, the only one she owned, and draped it over his shoulders. He was shaking so hard his teeth clicked. "Come on," she said gently, slipping an arm under his. "My apartment has 6 blocks. We'll get you dry and figure this out." He weighed almost nothing. Together, they shuffled through the storm, her arm around his waist, his around her shoulders, the leather notebook pressed between them like a shared heart. Her building was the kind of place where the lobby light flickered, and the elevator had been broken since June. She half carried him up 3 flights, key shaking in the lock. Inside, her studio looked exactly like what it was. One room with a hot plate, a futon that doubled as a bed, and stacks of children's artwork covering every surface because her third graders insisted on gifting her their masterpieces. She sat the old man on the futon, peeled off his soaked cardigan, wrapped him in every blanket she owned. His skin was ice under paper-thin veins. He kept murmuring bench, bench, until she pressed a mug of canned chicken soup into his hands. He drank it like a child, both hands around the mug, eyes never leaving her face. Clara found an old t-shirt of her father S. never thrown away after he died, and helped him change. The sailboat pajama pants were too short on his bony legs, but they were dry. She was wringing out his cardigan in the sink when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. She opened the door a crack. A delivery man in a yellow rain slicker stood there, dripping, holding a small brown package wrapped in twine. "Clara Evans? That is me." He handed it over without another word and disappeared down the stairs. No return address, just her name written in elegant, slanted handwriting. Inside was a first edition copy of The Little Prince, the 1943 printing, worth more than she made in a year. A note card tucked between the pages read, in the same handwriting, "Thank you for kindness when no one else looked." Clara stared at the book, then at the old man now asleep on her futon, mouth slightly open, leather notebook clutched to his chest like a teddy bear. She sat on the floor beside him and opened the notebook with careful fingers. The first page held a single charcoal sketch: a park bench in the rain, an old man sitting alone, head bowed exactly the way she had found him. Underneath, in the same elegant handwriting, "I waited 51 years for someone to see me." Clara S. breath caught. She turned the page. Another sketch, this one of a young woman in 1940s clothing, laughing, eyes bright with love. The resemblance to Clara herself was uncanny. She closed the notebook quickly, heart racing for reasons she couldn't name. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle patter against the single window. Inside, in a tiny studio lit by one lamp and the glow of kindness, Clara Evans looked at the sleeping stranger, who had nowhere else to go, and made a decision that would rewrite both their stories. She pulled the extra blanket over his shoulders, whispered, "You re safe now," and sat watch until dawn, the priceless book in her lap, and a feeling in her chest, like the first day of spring after the longest winter. The man from the bench slept on, dreaming in charcoal and lost years. And the teacher who had nothing gave the only thing she had left her home, her heart, and a promise that tomorrow would be different. Little did she know the storm had only been the beginning. Morning light slipped through the cracked blinds in pale gold bars, landing across the old man's face like gentle fingers waking him. Clara had dozed off in the armchair, neck stiff, still clutching the little prince. She jolted awake when he stirred. He sat up slowly, blanket sliding to his waist, eyes clearer than the night before. For a moment he looked around the tiny studio with something like wonder, as if seeing color after decades of gray. Then he smiled at her, small, shy, heartbreakingly grateful. "Bonjour," he said, voice soft and accented, French rolling off his tongue like music. "You kept me?" Clara S. heart flipped. "You were safe. I am Clara. Do you remember your name?" He frowned, touched his temple, then shook his head. "Only bench." He pointed at the leather notebook on the coffee table. "And that." She handed it to him. His fingers, long, elegant, stained faintly with old charcoal, traced the cover like greeting an old friend. He opened it to the sketch of the young woman from the 1940s. His eyes filled. "Ella S. Appellate Marguerite," he whispered. "My Marguerite." Clara didn't speak French, but she understood the name was sacred. Over the next days, they built a fragile routines. She called him Mr. Ben because bench was the only word he seemed certain of. He accepted it with a courtly nod every time, as if titles no longer mattered. He showered with the door open a crack because he was afraid of small spaces. He ate everything she put in front of him: canned soup, peanut butter sandwiches, instant oatmeal, like each bite was a miracle. At night, he slept on the futon while she took the floor with a yoga mat and one pillow. And every morning, another package arrived. Day 2, a 1920s silver pocket watch engraved with tiny birds worth thousands. Day 3, a first edition Hemingway with a pressed violet between pages 112 and 113. Day 4, a cashmere scarf the color of sunrise and a note that simply read, "You are seen." No sender, no return address, just perfect, impossible gifts, left outside her door before the city woke up. Clara stopped questioning how. She simply placed each treasure on the single shelf above the hot plate and went to work, locking Mr. Ben inside with the TV remote and strict instructions to open the door for no one. He never tried the knob. He waited for her like a child waiting for recess. At school, her third graders noticed the difference immediately. "Miss Clara, why do you keep smiling at nothing?" "Because someone needed a home and I had an extra blanket," she told them. They accepted it the way only 8-year-olds can. Evenings were when Mr. Ben came alive. He would sit at her wobbly kitchen table with the leather notebook and whatever pencil stubs she could spare. His hand moved in long, confident strokes, producing portraits so lifelike they seemed ready to breathe. He drew Clara teaching at the whiteboard. Clara laughing with soup on her chin. Clara asleep in the armchair with the lamp haloing her hair. He never signed them. He simply slid each finished page across the table with that same shy smile. One night he hummed, while he drew a haunting melody Clara didn't recognize. She recorded 30 seconds on her phone and played it for the music teacher the next day. The woman went pale. That's Fauré's Pavane, Opus 50. He hasn't hummed since 1890 or something. Clara began to wonder what else this gentle lost man had locked inside. On the seventh night, the biggest package yet arrived, a flat wooden crate the size of a pizza box. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue, lay a single oil painting on canvas Marguerite, the woman from the sketches, standing in a sunlit Paris garden, paint still vivid after 70 years. The back of the canvas bore a faded inscription, "To my Marguerite who taught me color." If you are reading this, someone finally taught me kindness again. Give them everything. B. Laurent, 1971. Clara stared at the signature until the letters blurred. She Googled the name with shaking fingers. Benjamin Laurent, French post-impressionist genius. Presumed drowned in the Seine in 1972 after the death of his fiancée. Hundreds of paintings vanished. Reward for information leading to recovery. 10 million euros, still unclaimed. Clara looked across the room at Mr. Ben asleep on the futon, mouth slightly open, clutching his notebook like a child with a stuffed bear. She closed the laptop, heart pounding so loud she was sure it would wake him. The gift suddenly made sense. Someone, something knew exactly who he was and had been waiting for the one person willing to take a confused old man home from a rainy bench. Clara pulled the blanket higher over his shoulders, pressed a soft kiss to his temple like a daughter would, and whispered into the quiet room, "I don't know who you were, Mr. Ben, but you're home now." Outside, the city kept moving. Inside the tiny studio, an unknown masterpiece worth millions leaned against a stack of construction paper turkeys, waiting for the rest of the story to catch up. And the teacher who had nothing kept giving the one thing she did have room in her heart for a stranger who was about to make her legendary. The painting of Marguerite stayed propped against the wall for 3 more days, watching the tiny apartment like a beautiful ghost. Clara couldn't stop staring at it. Every brushstroke felt alive, the sunlight on Margarita's hair so real, she half expected the woman to turn and speak. At night, she moved it to the top of the bookshelf so Mr. Ben wouldn't see it when he woke, confused, and searching for a bench that no longer existed. But secrets have weight, and this one grew heavier every hour. On the 10th night, Clara came home late. Parent-teacher conferences had run long, and found Mr. Ben at the kitchen table bathed in the single lamp's glow. He wasn't eating the soup she'd left warming. He was drawing. A thick leather-bound sketchbook lay open in front of him. Not the small notebook he carried, but a larger one that had arrived that morning in another silent crate. Its pages were filled with hundreds of portraits of Marguerite at every age 18 and laughing, 25 and painting, 30 and pregnant, with a hand cradling a belly that would never hold a child. Clara's heart stopped. Mr. Ben's hand moved without pause, charcoal flying. The face taking shape on the fresh page was hers. Clara at 28, hair in the messy bun she wore for teaching, eyes tired but kind, mouth curved in the exact half smile she used when a child finally understood fractions. Underneath, in the same elegant script from the painting, he wrote, "She came back. Clara's knees gave out. She sank into the opposite chair. Mr. Ben," she whispered. He looked up. For the first time since the rainy bench, his eyes were completely clear. No fog, no searching. They were the sharp, stormy blue of a man who had once painted Paris into silence. "Clara," he said, French accent thick but every word perfect. "You kept me." The charcoal dropped from his fingers. "I remember now," he continued, voice cracking like thin ice. My name is Benjamin Laurent. I painted under the name B. Laurent. Marguerite died in 1971 childbirth, both of them. I couldn't have breathed without her. So I stopped breathing for the world. I faked the drowning, sold everything quietly, hid the paintings, and wandered until the wandering became forgetting. Until the night you found me on that bench. Tears rolled down the valleys of his cheeks, but his gaze never left her face. You look like her, he said. Not the face, the light, the same stubborn light that refuses to let the dark win. Clara reached across the table and took his paint-stained hands that had once been worth millions. I filed adult adoption papers last week, she said quietly. I was afraid they'd have put you in a state facility when your memory didn't come back. The judge signed them yesterday. Legally, you are my father now. I thought it would protect you safe. Benjamin S. breath hitched. He turned her hands over, studying them like they were holy relics. Marguerite and I wanted children, he whispered. We never got them. And now, the universe sends me a daughter who chooses me when I have nothing but nightmares in sailboat pajamas. He laughed once, wet, broken, healed. Clara laughed with him, tears falling onto the sketchbook. Benjamin pulled the big book closer and flipped to the last page. A charcoal map, precise as memory, showed a warehouse address on the edge of the city and a combination lock code written beneath. Everything is there, he said. Over 400 paintings. Insured for €500 million the last time I checked. The will is simple. Upon proof of my survival, every canvas belongs to the first person who showed me true kindness without knowing my name. That person must be my legal next of kin. He tapped the adoption order she had left on the counter, now bearing a raised gold seal. That person is you, ma fille. Clara stared at the map, then at the man who had come to her with nothing but a notebook and a repeated word. I don't want your money, she said fiercely. I want you. Benjamin cupped her cheek with a trembling hand. Then keep me, he answered, and let the paintings keep the children who need them. Marguerite would have liked that. Outside snow began to fall soft, silent, the first of the season. Inside the tiny studio that suddenly felt too small for the size of the miracle it held, a legendary painter, and the teacher who had adopted him, sat holding hands across a wobbly table while the past caught up with the present and decided to stay. The sketchbook lay open between them. Clara's portrait glowing under the lamp like a promise kept after 51 years. And for the first time in half a century, Benjamin Laurent closed his eyes without fear, because someone had finally come back for him. And this time, he was home. The warehouse sat forgotten on the city's edge, a gray concrete box behind chain link and weeds, the number 47 barely visible on a rusted sign. Clara drove her rattling 10-year-old hatchback with Benjamin beside her, wrapped in 3 of her scarves and the seat warmer cranked to high. Snow still fell in fat, lazy flakes, melting on the windshield the moment the wipers touched them. Neither spoke. The adoption papers and the sketchbook map lay on the dashboard like passports to another life. They reached the gate at 9:12 a.m. The combination lock opened on the first try, 07-1471. The day Marguerite died. Inside, the air smelled of cedar shavings and old canvas. Rows of ceiling lights flickered on one by one as Benjamin flipped ancient switches, revealing aisle after aisle of paintings wrapped in soft white cloth, standing like silent soldiers waiting for orders after 51 years. Clara's breath caught. Benjamin walked slowly, touching each frame the way a man touches gravestones of the beloved. He stopped at the first row and pulled back the cloth. Marguerite in a red dress on a Paris rooftop, city lights glittering behind her like scattered diamonds. Marguerite laughing in a field of sunflowers taller than she was. Marguerite asleep on a window seat, one hand curled over the swell of a belly that never got to hold their child. Every canvas was a love letter written in oil and grief. Benjamin's fingers trembled as he uncovered more later works. Darker, storms over the Seine, empty cafes at dawn, a single candle burning in a window, that looked exactly like Clara S. apartment window. He turned to her, eyes shining. "I painted you before I met you," he whispered. "I just didn't know your name yet." Clara walked deeper, pulling claws as she went. Colors exploded: cobalt skies, emerald rivers, children dancing in streets that looked like every city and no city at once. There were over 400 canvases, each one a masterpiece the world had mourned as lost forever. At the very back stood a single easel holding an unfinished portrait. Benjamin and Clara side by side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them older than they were now, smiling at something outside the frame. The date in the corner was yesterday. Clara S. knees buckled. Benjamin caught her. "I painted what I hoped would happen," he said against her hair. "And then you made it real." They found the legal folder in a metal box beneath the easel, updated every year by a discreet lawyer paid in cash. The will was simple, ironclad, witnessed by Swiss notaries. Upon proof of Benjamin Laurent's survival, everything, paintings, royalties, bank accounts, passed to his legal next of kin, who had shown him true kindness without expectation of reward. That next of kin was now Clara Evans Laurent, daughter by choice and by law. Reporters found them 2 days later. A single leaked photo: Clara and Benjamin, standing in the warehouse doorway, arms around each other. Snow in their hair hit the internet and shattered it. Headlines screamed across every language. Missing painter Benjamin Laurent, found alive after 51 years. Teacher adopts lost genius, inherits $500 million in hidden art. The daughter who brought him home. The art world descended. Auction houses offered blank checks. Museums begged. Billionaires sent private jets. Clara and Benjamin held a press conference in the courtyard of her little elementary school, children waving hand-drawn welcome signs behind them. Clara spoke first, voice steady. These paintings were never lost. They were waiting for someone to choose kindness over convenience. "I didn't adopt my father for money. I adopted him because no one should die alone on a bench in the rain." She gestured to the crowd of third graders clutching new boxes of paints. "We reselling exactly 10%, just enough to build free art schools in every city that ever turned an old man away. The rest stay in a public museum open to everyone, no tickets, no velvet ropes. It will be called the Marguerite Light Museum because light is what she taught him to paint, and light is what he taught me to carry." Benjamin stepped forward, thinner than the photos from 1972, but eyes blazing with life. "My daughter speaks for both of us," he said simply. "Marguerite always said art belongs to the people who need it most. Clara is making that true." He turned to her, took her hand, and bowed the old-fashioned bow of a painter to his muse. Cameras flashed like stars. That night they went home to the same tiny studio, because Clara refused to leave until the new house attached to the museum was ready. They cooked canned soup on the same hot plate. Benjamin raised his mug in a toast. "To daughters who come back," he said. "To fathers who waited," Clara answered. They clinked chipped ceramic and drank. Outside, the city buzzed with the legend of the teacher and the lost painter. Inside, a family of two ate soup under the glow of a single lamp, surrounded by construction paper turkeys and a $500 million legacy that suddenly felt exactly the right size. Because some fortunes aren't measured in euros. They're measured in the space between a rainy bench and a daughter who refused to walk away. 10 years later, on the first warm day of spring, the Marguerite Light Museum opened its doors for the 10 millionth visitor. The building stood where the old warehouse once sagged. 3 stories of glass and sunlight wrapped around a courtyard garden, where children painted on easels under the same sky that had once watched an old man wait on a bench. Admission was, and always would be, free. Clara Evans Laurent, now 38, paint in her hair, laughter lines around her eyes, stood at the entrance beside Benjamin, 89 and frail but upright in a linen suit, the color of Margarita's favorite dress. He leaned on a cane carved from the wood of the original park bench, sanded smooth and polished by children's hands. A little girl in a wheelchair rolled up, clutching a crayon drawing of a sunflower taller than she was. "For you, Mr. Ben?" she said shyly. Benjamin knelt, slowly, carefully, and accepted it like it was a lost canvas returned. This, he told the crowd gathered for the ceremony, voice soft but carrying, is worth more than every painting in my warehouse, because it was made by someone who learned she could. He pinned the sunflower drawing to the community wall number 10 million, right beside the very first drawing Clara's third graders had ever given her. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed. Somewhere a brass band played the melody of Forêt's Pavane because the children had voted on it. Clara stepped to the microphone. 10 years ago, I brought home a stranger from the rain with nothing but a notebook and a repeated word, she said. Today that stranger is my father, my best friend, and the reason 10 million people have walked through doors that will never charge a penny. We built 63 free art schools on 5 continents. We gave away 20 million boxes of paints. And every single year, on the anniversary of the night I found him, children around the world draw sunflowers and leave them on park benches with a note that says, "You are seen." She turned to Benjamin. "Dad, the world tried to forget you once. We made sure it never will again." Benjamin's eyes shone. He pulled a small leather notebook from his pocket, the same one from the rainy night, now worn buttersoft, and opened it to the last blank page. On it he drew, live in front of the cameras, one final portrait. Clara standing in the museum courtyard surrounded by children of every color, all of them reaching toward the sky with paintbrushes like flowers. Underneath he wrote, in the elegant script that had once signed canvases worth millions, "To my daughter Clara, who taught an old man that the greatest masterpiece is a heart that refuses to walk past suffering. You were the light I waited 51 years to find. I love you forever." "Papa!" He tore the page out and handed it to her. Clara's tears fell onto the charcoal, smudging it just enough to make the children look like they were glowing. Later, when the crowds thinned and the sun began its slow descent, they walked, just the two of them, to the quiet garden at the heart of the museum. A single park bench waited there, carved from the same wood as Benjamin's cane, plaque reading, "In memory of the night kindness won, sit, rest, you are home." They sat. Benjamin rested his head on Clara's shoulder, the way he had the first night in her studio. Only now it was she who wrapped the blanket around both of them. Children's laughter drifted from open windows, kids painting murals on walls that would never be white again. Somewhere inside, the original painting of Marguerite hung in a place of honor, smiling down on every child who lifted a brush for the first time. Benjamin spoke, voice barely above the breeze. "I thought I died the day she did," he said. "I was wrong. I just went to sleep for 51 years. You woke me up." Clara kissed the top of his white hair. "And you taught me that family isn't only the people we're born to. Sometimes it is the people brave enough to choose us when we have nothing left to give." They sat in perfect silence until the stars came out one by one by one, until the museum lights dimmed to bedtime gold. Years later, when Benjamin finally slipped away at 97, peaceful in his sleep with Clara holding his hand and a sunflower drawing tucked under his pillow, the world mourned for exactly one day. Then it celebrated for the rest of time. Because the Marguerite Light Museums kept growing, one in every country that asked, each with its own bench, its own garden, its own children painting sunflowers on the anniversary of a rainy night no one would ever forget. And every year, on that anniversary, Clara, gray-haired now, surrounded by grandchildren who called her Nana Light, would sit on the original bench with a new box of crayons and draw a single portrait. An old man on a rainy bench, a young woman offering her coat, and between them, a small glowing heart that said, "He waited. She came." Love finished the story. The legend of the poor teacher who adopted an abandoned old man became the favorite bedtime story in 100 languages. Because some miracles don't need billions of dollars. They just need one person willing to share the only thing they have: a blanket, a bowl of soup, and a heart big enough to say, "You belong with me." And in the end, that was worth more than every lost masterpiece ever painted, because it painted the world new.